approval on this ambitious undertaking, that is the National Infrastructure Fund and the Sovereign Wealth Fund. But we've seen that is not what really happened. So on Monday, we had the cabinet, of course, dispatch, and we read all the details inside there. Let's just begin. How did it fly below the radar of the National Assembly? Caroli, good evening.
Thank you very much. Let me begin by saying that the idea of having a national infrastructure fund is not a bad idea at all. And it is not Kenya that is developing this idea for the first time. So it's not a bad idea. But let me also observe that as a parliament, we have not discussed it. So as far as I know, there is no national infrastructure fund as we speak today. There could just be an intention by the executive or a proposal. And the president and the cabinet are within their rights to make that proposal. But if you look at our constitution, under Article 206, any fund other than the 4 funds that are established by the constitution must be established by an act of parliament. Article 204 establishes the equalization fund. Then we have the county government fund. Then we have the contingency fund, and of course the one which is well known, the consolidated fund. So all other funds are actually subsets of the consolidated fund. So a national infrastructure fund will be a subset of the consolidated fund established by an act of parliament. So I believe that the executive will have to bring a bill to the House to establish that fund. The things that cannot be established by an act of parliament will be the subsidiary businesses that particular fund will support. I think Kenyans probably need to understand what an infrastructure fund is. The difference is the way the projects are financed. In other words, what the government is seeking to do is to have a fund that leverages its own resources, then matches with private sector funds to support infrastructure projects by way of equity financing and not loan. They will not be financing them as loans. The government will say, okay, we have X amount that we are willing to put into this project for this particular equity stake. Then the private sector will come along to partner with them. But because this is all within the rubric of the so-called Singaporean dream that we have, let me begin by saying this, that Lee Kuan Yew, whom we are now keen to follow, had a simple mantra. If you want to compete globally, then you must adopt global standards. It is a good thing to pronounce that you want to have an infrastructure fund, but it is a very risky thing to exaggerate the size of that fund. Because what came out of that cabinet meeting is that we are going to have a 5 trillion infrastructure fund. Let me give you some numbers, then you can see why that exaggeration is dangerous. 1, Kenya's total debt portfolio is 12 trillion.
Inching up to 13, yeah.
The external debt component, which is forex-based, is over just above 5-6 trillion, which is actually equivalent of $38 billion. If you say 5 trillion, that we are going to have an infrastructure fund for 5 trillion, you are talking about $38 billion. $38 billion. Our debt, half of our debt, which is externally, what we call external debt, foreign currency denominated, is just about $42 billion. We are struggling to pay that, and we are saying we are going to establish something at 38 billion. If you look at the National Investment and Infrastructure Fund of India, established in 2015, with the size of the economy of India, is $5 billion. $3 billion by the government of India, $2 billion by other players, non-government players like Temasek of Singapore has also invested in there. If you look at the South African Infrastructure Fund, which is run by DBSA, the bank in South Africa, is 37 billion rand. which is about 8 billion Kenyan shillings. If you look at the other fund, Saudi National Infrastructure Fund, with all the oil, all the dollars they have, is $53 billion. Yeah. If you look at there's also a private one in Africa, Africa Infrastructure Fund,
yes,
which is focusing on new economy, digital infrastructure, energy transition, mobility and logistics. That one is at $2.5 billion dollars. So to say that Kenya will establish an infrastructure fund
of $38 billion,
other than making a political statement, is entering the market on the wrong footing. In other words, we are not respecting what Lee Kuan Yew said. Because in financial markets, your first line of credibility are the numbers that you present. So it is very important that if the government wants this thing to succeed, then they must bring a proposal that has credible numbers. Any analyst, financial analyst, will just look at the proposal and look at the data very quickly and say this is more of a political statement or a political narrative than a serious financial pitch. So that is the first problem I have with it. But there are other...
So from your assessment, do you think it's maybe for political optics and expediency?
The way it has been presented so far,
yes,
it will pass like